I never thought I would witness my own family deliberately leave my daughter behind on a sweltering Caribbean dock. The blazing sun beat down as Taylor stood there, confusion and hurt in her eyes, watching our cruise ship family members pile into their private tour van. Nobody even looked back. 3 hours later, as my 14-year-old fought off heat exhaustion, she looked at me with determination. "Will you do what you promised?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. And by dinner, they will never forget it. The Caribbean cruise was supposed to be the perfect family vacation. At least that was what my mother-in-law Martha had insisted when she announced she was treating the entire family to celebrate my father-in-law Howard's retirement. The Sullivan Family Legacy Cruise, she called it with her perfectly practiced smile. I should have known better. I had married into the Sullivan family 15 years ago when Jack and I fell in love during college. From day one, I, Alexis Sullivan née Parker, had been an outsider. Not wealthy enough, not sophisticated enough, not Sullivan enough. But I had learned to navigate the cold undercurrents of family gatherings for Jack's sake, and now for Taylor's. Our daughter Taylor was 14, bright and sensitive, with her father's blue eyes and my stubborn determination. She also had something else from my side of the family, a severe shellfish allergy that had sent her to the hospital twice. An allergy that my in-laws constantly downplayed as attention-seeking or all in her head. The cruise ship was massive, a floating luxury hotel with everything from water slides to Broadway shows. Jack's brother Scott, his wife Tiffany, and their children Ashley and Brent had the cabin next to Howard and Martha's suite. We were relegated to the opposite end of the ship. It was all they had left, Martha had explained with a thin smile. "You booked so late." We hadn't booked late. Martha had made all the arrangements. The first 3 days followed a familiar pattern. Ashley and Brent received special treats from Grandma and Grandpa. Taylor received passing acknowledgement. During formal night, Martha had presented Ashley with a beautiful silver necklace. "Something special for my granddaughter," she had announced to the table. Taylor had smiled through it, used to being the afterthought grandchild. On the 4th morning, we gathered for breakfast to plan the day's port excursion at St. Lucia. Taylor had been particularly excited about this stop, having researched the island for a school geography project. "I found this hiking tour through the rainforest that shows local plants used in traditional medicine," she said, showing her carefully compiled research. "It even includes transportation to and from the dock." Martha had barely glanced at the tablet screen. "We have already made arrangements," she announced. "Howard has connections with a resort owner. We have a private beach and lunch excursion arranged." "That sounds great too," Taylor said, trying to hide her disappointment. "When do we leave?" Martha stirred her coffee slowly. "Well, darling, that is the thing. It is a limited-capacity tour. Very exclusive." Howard cleared his throat. 6 spots only. We have 1 for each of us, plus Scott, Tiffany, and the children. I noticed immediately. "That is 8 people. You said 6 spots." Oh, Martha's surprise seemed rehearsed. "Did I say 6? I meant 8. Still, that is all they had available." I looked at Jack, expecting him to say something. He avoided my eyes. "So Taylor and I aren't included?" I asked directly. "It was so last minute," Martha sighed dramatically. "And we know how careful you are about Taylor's allergy. The lunch is a seafood spread. We were thinking of her safety, really." That was the first twist that made my blood boil. They had deliberately excluded Taylor, using her medical condition as an excuse while pretending it was for her own good. I watched my daughter's face fall, trying to mask her hurt as she always did. "Jack," I said quietly, "a word, please." In the hallway, I confronted my husband. "This is unacceptable. Your mother deliberately left out Taylor." "Alexis, you're overreacting. It's just one excursion," he replied, the familiar refrain whenever his family was involved. "We can do something fun, just the 3 of us." "That's not the point, and you know it." "Look, I'll talk to them. Maybe they can add 2 more spots." But I knew from 15 years of experience that nothing would change. Martha had orchestrated this exclusion perfectly, as she had done countless times before. The ship docked at St. Lucia just after 10 in the morning. The air was thick with humidity. As we disembarked, the temperature already climbing toward 95 degrees. The dock area was crowded with tourists and locals, a chaotic mixture of tour guides holding signs and vendors, selling everything from handmade crafts to bottled water. Taylor had been quiet all morning, but I could see she was making an effort to remain positive. She wore her favorite blue sundress and had her camera ready, determined to at least get some photos for her school project. "The humidity is making me feel a little sick," Taylor said as we walked down the gangway. The ship had been rough the night before and she'd been struggling with mild seasickness. "I need to use the bathroom really quick." "I'll take her," I told Jack. "You wait with your family." The nearest restroom was in a small building at the end of the dock. By the time we emerged 5 minutes later, the crowded pier had somehow swallowed Jack and the rest of the Sullivans. I tried calling his cell but got no answer. "Maybe they're waiting by the tour buses," Taylor suggested. We searched for 20 minutes, pushing through the crowds, the sun beating down mercilessly on us. Taylor's face was already flushed from the heat. Finally, my phone rang. "Where are you?" I demanded when I heard Jack's voice. "We're already on the tour van," he replied casually. "Mom was worried about being late, so we had to go ahead." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You left without us, without even trying to call." "I tried texting," he said defensively. "The signal must be bad. Listen, we'll only be gone about an hour. You and Taylor can explore the port shops. There's plenty to see." "Jack, it's brutally hot out here, and we don't have any water or sunscreen. You took the bag with our supplies." "Just buy some," he replied, as if it were the simplest solution in the world. "Gotta go, we're leaving now. See you in an hour." The call ended before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, momentarily stunned by my husband's casual abandonment of his daughter. When I looked at Taylor, I could see she had overheard everything. "They left without us, didn't they?" she asked, her voice small. "They did," I admitted, not willing to sugarcoat what had just happened. "But we'll make our own fun. Let's find some water in a shady spot." That proved more difficult than expected. The port shops were overpriced tourist traps, charging $12 for a small bottle of water. I bought 2, along with an overpriced floppy hat for Taylor that provided at least some protection from the sunday. Most of the shaded areas were already claimed by other tourists or reserved for specific tour groups. We found a narrow strip of shade against a building wall and tried to make the best of it. I continued texting Jack, asking when they'd return, telling him how hot it was. My messages showed as delivered, but there were no replies. 1 hour stretched into 2. Our water was gone, and Taylor's face had progressed from flushed to alarmingly red, despite our attempts to stay in the minimal shade. My own head was pounding from the relentless heat. "Mom, I don't feel so good." Taylor said, her voice worryingly weak. Her hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. I tried Jack again. No answer. I tried Scott, Tiffany, even Martha and Howard. Nothing. It was as if they'd all silently agreed to ignore us. The realization that this was not accidental negligence but deliberate exclusion made my stomach churn. By the 3-hour mark, Taylor was clearly suffering from the heat. She'd stopped sweating, which I knew was a dangerous sign. Her skin was hot to the touch, and she seemed disoriented. I was genuinely frightened now, considering whether to try finding medical help at the port or returning to the ship's medical center. Just as I'd made the decision to get Taylor back to the ship, a private van pulled up. The Sullivan family spilled out laughing and chatting, shopping bags in hand, and not a care in the world. "That was amazing," I heard Ashley gush. "The snorkeling was perfect." "Look at all my pictures with the tropical fish," Brent was saying, showing something on his phone to Jack. They walked toward us, and for a moment I thought there would be apologies, concern, some acknowledgement of the dangerous situation they'd put us in. I was wrong. "There you are," Martha said, as if we'd been the ones to wander off. "Did you enjoy the shops?" "We had the most marvelous time. The resort was absolutely exclusive." I stood up, Taylor leaning heavily against me. "You said you'd be gone an hour. It's been more than 3. Martha waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we were having such a wonderful time we decided to extend the tour. The resort owner was so accommodating." "Taylor's been sitting in dangerous heat for hours," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "She's showing signs of heat exhaustion." That's when Martha delivered the line that would become the second major twist in our cruise nightmare. She looked at Taylor's clearly distressed condition, then at me, and said with utter disdain, "Don't be so dramatic, Alexis. The girl's fine. You coddle her too much. A little sun never hurt anyone." Howard chuckled in agreement. Scott and Tiffany avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to speak up. And Jack, my own husband, just stood there silently. In that moment, something inside me snapped. 15 years of tolerating their subtle cruelty, of making excuses, of begging Jack to stand up to his parents, all came crashing down. I looked at my daughter, at her suffering caused deliberately by people who should have loved and protected her, and I knew things were about to change. The ship's medical center was mercifully cool after the scorching heat of the port. Taylor sat on the examination table, a nurse taking her vitals while a doctor asked questions about her symptoms. I explained what had happened, my voice tight, with barely controlled anger. 3 hours in direct sun, with minimal water. The doctor, Dr. Rivera, according to her name tag, looked alarmed. In this heat and humidity, that's extremely dangerous. She examined Taylor, thoroughly checking her temperature, heart rate, and hydration levels. Your daughter is suffering from moderate heat exhaustion, she explained. Another hour out there and it could have progressed to heat stroke, which can cause organ damage or worse. Taylor was given IV fluids to rehydrate her quickly. As the nurse tended to her, Dr. Rivera took me aside. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to document this incident. Heat-related illness is serious, especially in someone so young. How exactly did this happen? I explained the situation truthfully, my voice breaking, when I described how the family had deliberately left us behind. Dr. Rivera's expression grew increasingly concerned as I spoke. That's troubling, she said finally. I'll need to note all of this in her medical record. The cruise line takes passenger safety very seriously. While Taylor was being treated, Jack finally appeared at the medical center, his face a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. How is she? He asked, not quite meeting my eyes. She'll be okay, no thanks to your family, I replied coldly. The doctor says she narrowly avoided heat stroke. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Look, I'm sorry things worked out this way, but it wasn't intentional. Mom and Dad wouldn't deliberately hurt Taylor. Wouldn't they? 3 hours, Jack. 3 hours in 95-degree heat. No water, no shade. And not one of you answered my calls or texts. The service was bad, he protested weakly. Everyone else on that tour seemed to be using their phones just fine, I countered. I saw Brent posting pictures in real time. Jack had no answer for that. Dr. Rivera returned with discharge instructions for Taylor and a medical report documenting the incident. She handed me a copy, her expression serious. I've noted everything, including the circumstances. If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to come back. As we walked back to our cabin, Taylor leaning against me, still weak from her ordeal, I felt a surge of protective rage unlike anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't the first time the Sullivans had hurt my daughter, but I was determined it would be the last. 3 years earlier, after a particularly cruel Christmas where Taylor had received token gifts while Ashley and Brent were showered with expensive presents, I'd made a promise to my tearful daughter. We'd been sitting on her bed and I'd wiped away her tears as I said the words that would now define my actions. I will never let them hurt you again, I had promised her. Even if it means making difficult choices. Even if it means standing up to the entire family. You are more important than their approval, or their money, or anything else in this world. Now, as Taylor lay in our cabin bed, still pale and exhausted from her ordeal, she turned to me with a quiet determination in her eyes. Mom, she said softly, will you do what you promised? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with years of slights and hurts and silent suffering. I thought of all the times I'd bitten my tongue for the sake of family harmony, all the times I'd told Taylor to be patient, to understand that her grandparents were from a different generation, to not take their behavior personally. I thought of how just hours ago they had left my child in dangerous conditions, without a second thought, and then dismissed her suffering as dramatic exaggeration. Yes, I answered, my resolve hardening. Yes, I will. What happened next revealed the third shocking twist in our crew's nightmare. While Taylor rested, I decided to find out exactly what had happened during the family's exclusive excursion. I approached Brent, who at 16 was less guarded than the adults, and often spoke without thinking. Hey, Brent, I said casually, finding him by the pool deck. Sounds like you had an amazing time on your excursion. Tell me about it. Eager to boast, he pulled out his phone to show me photos. It was awesome. The resort had this private beach, and the chef made this incredible seafood lunch right on the shore. Seafood lunch, I repeated, my suspicions confirming themselves. Yeah, it was all local catch. Lobster, shrimp, this spicy crab thing. Grandma said it was the reason we couldn't bring Taylor because of her allergy thing. There it was. The excursion had centered around a seafood lunch, which was precisely why Martha had arranged it. Not to protect Taylor, but to deliberately exclude her while maintaining the appearance of concern. She had used my daughter's potentially life-threatening medical condition as a weapon against her. That night, as Taylor slept, I sat on our cabin balcony and made a decision. For 15 years I had tried to fit into the Sullivan family. I had made excuses for their behavior, had pleaded with Jack to see what was happening, had taught my daughter to accept less than she deserved. No more. The Sullivans had money, social standing, and a lifetime of manipulating those around them. But I had something they didn't expect: the truth documentation of their actions, and 4 more days on this cruise to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The morning after the abandonment incident, I woke up with crystal clear purpose. Taylor was still sleeping, recovering from her ordeal, so I slipped out of our cabin early. My first stop, the customer relations desk. The woman at the desk, Gabriella, according to her name tag, greeted me with a professional smile. "Good morning, how may I help you today?" "I need to speak with a manager about a serious incident that happened yesterday," I said quietly. "It involves passenger safety." 20 minutes later, I was seated in the office of Cameron Matthews, the ship's customer relations manager. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a serious demeanor. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand there was an incident during yesterday's port stop that resulted in your daughter requiring medical attention," he said, consulting the file Gabriella had prepared. I explained exactly what had happened, showing him the medical report from Dr. Rivera documenting Taylor's heat exhaustion. His expression darkened as I spoke. "This is deeply concerning," he said when I'd finished. "The safety of our passengers, especially minors, is our highest priority." "I have reason to believe this wasn't accidental negligence," I added, "but a deliberate exclusion. My in-laws used my daughter's shellfish allergy as an excuse to book an excursion centered around seafood, knowing she couldn't attend." Cameron's frown deepened. "That's a serious allegation, Mrs. Sullivan." "I know, and I can prove it," I replied. "I have text messages showing my attempts to contact my family while they were gone, all unanswered." The ship's communication logs would show these messages went through despite their claims of poor service. Cameron nodded slowly. "I can certainly check the communication logs. Our satellite system tracks all messages sent and received through our network." He typed something into his computer. "And yes, I can see multiple outgoing messages from your account yesterday between 11:15 and 2:30, all marked as delivered to the recipients." This confirmation bolstered my resolve. Additionally, my father-in-law claimed to have personal connections that arranged this exclusive excursion. Is there any way to verify if that's true? Cameron checked his system again. "According to our records, the excursion your family took was booked through our premium services desk 3 weeks ago. There's a notation here that it was specifically requested to be limited to 8 participants, though the standard capacity is 12. Another piece of evidence that this had been planned in advance. Martha hadn't just accidentally booked without us. She had deliberately arranged for a smaller group than necessary." Mrs. Sullivan, Cameron said after a moment, "I want you to know that we take this very seriously. What would you like us to do?" I thought carefully before answering. "I don't want to file a formal complaint yet. What I'd like is information. Access to ship resources that might help me understand the full picture of what's happening." Cameron seemed relieved that I wasn't demanding immediate action against the cruise line. "What kind of information would be helpful?" "First, documentation of yesterday's incident and the communication logs. Second, information about any other excursions my in-laws have booked for the remainder of the cruise. And finally," I hesitated, then decided to be completely honest, "I want to know if there's a way to adjust their experience on this ship without endangering anyone. They need to understand the consequences of their actions." A flicker of understanding crossed Cameron's face. He'd probably dealt with family disputes on cruises before, though perhaps none quite like this. "I can provide the documentation you've requested," he said carefully. "As for the rest, let's just say that passenger satisfaction is our primary goal. Sometimes that means making adjustments to ensure everyone has an appropriate experience." By the time I left Cameron's office, I had copies of the communication logs proving my messages had been delivered and ignored documentation of the excursion booking, showing it had been deliberately limited, and a complete itinerary of the remaining excursions my in-laws had planned. Most importantly, I had found an ally in Cameron who understood more than he explicitly stated. He gave me his direct extension number and told me to call if I needed anything else. My next stop was the ship's photography desk. During our first 3 days, the cruise photographers had taken numerous family photos, some of which had captured revealing moments I hadn't noticed at the time. Andrea, the lead photographer, helped me review the digital files. "We have quite a few of your family group," she said, pulling them up on her screen. There, it was evidence captured in pixels, Martha physically moving Taylor out of center position in family photos, Howard turning away when Taylor was speaking. A series of dinner shots where Ashley and Brent were lavished with attention while Taylor sat ignored. "I'd like copies of all of these," I said. "And I have a question about the photo packages." "Of course," Andrea replied. "What would you like to know?" "If certain photos were to become unavailable in the system, how would that work?" Andrea's eyes met mine, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Our system occasionally experiences selective file corruption. It's unfortunate but unpredictable. Usually affects photos grouped by booking number." By the time I returned to our cabin, Taylor was awake and feeling better. She looked at me curiously as I entered with my folder of evidence. "Mom, what's all that?" I sat beside her on the bed. "Insurance," I replied. "For what comes next?" I spent the afternoon gathering more intelligence. A conversation with our dining room steward revealed that Howard and Martha had requested a special cake for the final formal dinner, apparently planning some sort of announcement. The pool attendant mentioned overhearing Martha booking a private cabana for the following day at the cruise line's private island stop. The most revealing discovery came from an unexpected source. While getting coffee at the ship's cafe, I overheard a conversation between two business associates of Howard's who were also on the cruise. "Sullivan's retiring at the perfect time," one man said to the other, "getting out before the market shifts." "Smart man," his companion agreed. "And I hear he's announcing the trust fund distributions at the captain's dinner, setting up the next generation." "Both grandkids getting a start in life?" The first man nodded. "College and beyond, all taken care of." "Both grandkids. Not all three." The final piece clicked into place. This cruise wasn't just about celebrating Howard's retirement, it was about announcing financial provisions for Ashley and Brent with Taylor deliberately excluded. Once again, Martha and Howard were orchestrating a public display of favoritism, this time with lifelong financial implications. That evening, I made a series of strategic bookings. 2 spots on the exclusive waterfall excursion everyone had been talking about for our next port day. A reservation at the specialty restaurant for Taylor and me on formal night, and a private consultation with the ship's professional photographer for a special project I had in mind. When Jack returned to our cabin that night, he found me calmly reading on the balcony. "How's Taylor?" he asked, his voice tentative. "Much better," I replied without looking up from my book. "No thanks to your family." He sighed heavily. "Alexis, I know you're upset, but can we please not turn this into a bigger issue? There's only 4 days left of this cruise." I finally looked up at him, studying the man I'd married 15 years ago. Jack Sullivan had once been brave, kind, and fiercely protective of those he loved. Somewhere along the way, his parents' influence and financial control had eroded his spine. "Did you know the exclusive excursion your mother arranged was centered around a seafood lunch?" I asked quietly. She used Taylor's allergy as an excuse to exclude her. Jack's expression faltered. "That's not. I'm sure she didn't." "And did you know that your father is planning to announce trust funds for Ashley and Brent at the captain's dinner? Nothing for Taylor." This visibly shocked him. "What, no, that can't be right?" "I heard his business associates discussing it today. Your parents are once again making a public statement about who they consider real family members." Jack sat heavily on the deck chair opposite me. "I'll talk to them." "You've been saying that for 15 years, Jack. Nothing changes." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen countless times. "What do you want me to do?" "They're my parents." "And Taylor is your daughter," I reminded him. "She deserves better than this. We both do." The fourth shocking twist came when Jack reluctantly admitted what I'd long suspected. "You don't understand, Alexis. It's complicated. They've been helping us financially for years." "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The down payment for our house, Taylor's private school tuition, even parts of our mortgage when my business was struggling. They hold the purse strings." There it was. The financial control they had maintained over our lives, the golden handcuffs that had kept Jack compliant and silent in the face of their mistreatment. "So you've allowed them to hurt your daughter because you're afraid of losing their money," I said flatly. "It's not that simple," Jack protested weakly. "Actually, it is that simple. You've chosen your parents' financial support over your daughter's emotional well-being, over and over again." I stood up, gathering my book and phone. I'm going to check on Taylor. You should think about what kind of father you want to be remembered as, because right now you're failing at the job. As I left him sitting alone on the balcony, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The Jack I had fallen in love with was still in there somewhere, I believed that. But whether he found his way back to us or not, my path forward was clear. Operation Family Lesson was officially underway. The next morning marked the beginning of my carefully orchestrated plan. The Sullivans had spent years perfecting the art of subtle cruelty. Now they would experience what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Taylor and I had breakfast early, avoiding the family gathering. I had explained some of my plan to her enough that she understood changes were coming, but not so much that she would feel responsible for the fallout. "You don't have to do this for me, Mom," she had said. "I'm not just doing it for you," I'd replied. "I'm doing it for us. And honestly, for them too. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way." Our first port of call that day was a small island known for its beautiful beaches. Howard and Martha had booked an exclusive beach cabana, arranging for the entire family to have a private lounging area with dedicated service. I made my way to the Excursion's desk before disembarking, where I met briefly with Cameron. "Good morning, Mrs. Sullivan," he greeted me professionally, though I detected a hint of complicity in his eyes. "I've reviewed the situation we discussed yesterday. It seems there have been some scheduling conflicts with certain reservations." "What kind of conflicts?" I asked innocently. "It appears the beach cabana reservation for the Sullivan party has been superseded by a priority booking for a honeymoon couple. Unfortunately, all other cabanas are already reserved." I nodded solemnly. "How unfortunate. I'm sure alternate arrangements can be made." "Of course," Cameron agreed. "Standard beach loungers will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. The Sullivan party has been notified of the change via their cabin messaging system." As we disembarked, I could already see Martha's pinched expression as she berated a hapless crew member about the cabana situation. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she was saying. "Do you know who my husband is? We specifically booked that cabana weeks ago." The crew member was apologetically standing his ground. "I understand your frustration, Mrs. Sullivan, but the system shows your reservation was changed last night. There's nothing I can do as all other cabanas are booked." Martha spotted me and immediately changed tactics. "Alexis, can you believe this? Our family cabana has been given away. Now we'll have to sit with the common tourists like, well, you know." "How terrible for you," I replied, keeping my face neutral. "Taylor and I will be exploring the nature preserve on the other side of the island. I hear it's quite educational." Nature preserve. In this heat, Martha looked genuinely puzzled that anyone would choose education over luxury lounging. "Taylor's doing a special project on island ecosystems," I explained, "and we'll be staying hydrated and in the shade. We've learned our lesson about sun exposure, haven't we?" Martha had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before rallying. "Well, Howard will sort this cabana situation out. He always does." But Howard didn't sort it out. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, his money and connections failed to get him what he wanted. The family ended up on the regular beach fighting for loungers like everyone else, their day of exclusive luxury ruined. That was just the beginning. Throughout the day, small inconveniences plagued the Sullivans. Their lunch reservation at the beach restaurant was mysteriously lost. The snorkeling equipment they'd pre-booked was given to another group. The golf cart they'd arranged to tour the island broke down halfway through. None of these things were directly traceable to me. They were the kind of unfortunate coincidences that happen on vacation, the kind of disappointments the Sullivans usually inflicted rather than experienced. Back on the ship that evening, I implemented the next phase of my plan. Using my background in social media marketing, a detail I'd never shared with my in-laws, I began crafting a narrative online. I posted carefully edited photos from our cruise on my rarely used social media accounts, knowing that Martha's society friends followed me to keep tabs on the family. One post showed Taylor alone at the dock while the family van drove away in the background. Another showed her in the medical center receiving treatment for heat exhaustion. I tagged mutual acquaintances with captions like family vacation memories and learning who really cares about us. By dinner time, Martha's phone was buzzing constantly with concerned messages from her social circle. I watched from across the dining room as her face grew increasingly distressed with each notification. "Is everything all right, Martha?" I asked sweetly when our paths crossed at the dessert station. There seems to be some confusion among my friends, she replied, her voice tight. They're asking if Taylor is okay if there was some sort of accident yesterday. Oh, that I said casually. Yes, I posted a few photos from our port day. Taylor's fine now, though the doctor was quite concerned about her heat exhaustion after being left at the dock for 3 hours. Martha's eyes narrowed. You're making us look bad deliberately. I met her gaze steadily. I'm simply sharing our family vacation experiences, Martha. Isn't that what social media is for sharing memories? Before she could respond, I added, By the way, your dinner reservation tonight has been changed from the Italian specialty restaurant to the main dining room. Something about a booking conflict. Cameron at Customer Relations can explain it all. As I walked away, I heard Martha's frustrated huff. The specialty restaurant reservation had been her opportunity to host Howard's business associates another power play in her social chess game. Now she would be forced to dine with the regular passengers, her carefully planned evening ruined. The fifth shocking twist came that evening when I overheard Howard and Martha arguing in what they thought was a private corner of the deck. This is getting out of hand, Howard Martha was saying. First the cabana, then the restaurant reservation. And now my friends are asking questions about Taylor. It's just bad luck, Howard insisted. These things happen on cruises. As for the girl, you know the plan. She was never going to be included in the trusts anyway. She's not really family. But everyone is starting to talk. If this gets back to the Prestons or the Whitefields before the announcement, it won't matter, Howard said dismissively. Once we announce the trusts for Ashley and Brent at the captain's dinner, everyone will be focused on that. It's a brilliant move, really. Making the announcement publicly means Jack won't be able to object without creating a scene. And you're sure about cutting them off if he protests? Martha asked. Absolutely, Howard's voice was cold. He needs to understand where his loyalties should lie. If he chooses that girl over his real family, there will be consequences. I slipped away before they noticed me, my blood boiling at what I'd heard. Taylor wasn't that girl. She was their granddaughter. And now I had confirmation of what I'd suspected all along. The final dinner was meant to be a public power play, a way to cement Taylor's exclusion from the family legacy while trapping Jack into silent acceptance. That night I made 2 important calls. First to Cameron requesting his help with the most important phase of my plan. Then to a contact back home, a headhunter who had been trying to recruit Jack away from his father's company for years. Jack might finally be ready to hear your offer, I told her. Send the details to my email. Make it good enough that even a man afraid of losing his family's financial support couldn't say no. By midnight, I had received the job offer information and forwarded it to Jack's email with a simple note. A way out if you're brave enough to take it. The next morning, the Sullivan family woke to find that every single one of their remaining excursions had been canceled due to technical issues. The family photo session they'd booked was mysteriously corrupted in the system. And Martha's spa day, which she'd been looking forward to all cruise, was rescheduled to conflict with the captain's dinner. Operation Family Lesson was in full swing, and the Sullivans were finally getting a taste of their own medicine. The 6th day of our cruise brought us to the most anticipated port, Angel Falls Cove, home to the spectacular Emerald Waterfall. This excursion was the highlight of the cruise itinerary, a limited capacity tour that had been sold out for months. Thanks to Cameron Taylor, and I had secured 2 spots on the earliest tour. We boarded the small tour boat at 7:30 in the morning, well before the rest of the family would even be awake. The early hour was worth it. We had front row seats to one of nature's most beautiful displays. The waterfall cascaded down a lush green mountainside, the water so clear it sparkled emerald in the morning light. Taylor's face lit up with wonder as our guide explained the unique mineral composition that created the distinctive color. "This is amazing, Mom," she whispered, taking photos with the new underwater camera I'd bought her from the ship's store. "I can't believe we get to see this." "Some experiences are worth getting up early for," I replied, squeezing her hand. We spent 3 magical hours exploring the falls, swimming in the natural pools at the base, and even venturing behind the waterfall into a small cave our guide showed us. It was the kind of authentic, joy-filled experience that no amount of money or status could improve. As our tour ended and we returned to the dock, I spotted the Sullivan family waiting for the next boat. Martha was fanning herself impatiently in the growing heat while Howard consulted his watch with obvious annoyance. "Well, look who's here," Martha said when she spotted us. "Decided to join the family activity after all." "Actually, we're just finishing up," I replied pleasantly. "Taylor and I took the early tour. It was spectacular." Early tour, Howard frowned. That's impossible. I specifically booked the first tour of the day for our family. It seems there was a change in the schedule, I said innocently. Our tour left at 7:30. Martha's eyes narrowed. That's our time slot. There must be some mistake. The tour operator approached with an apologetic expression. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan, I'm afraid there's been a complication with your booking. The 10:30 tour is at capacity, and we show your reservation was changed to the 2 o'clock departure. Changed by whom? Howard demanded. The system doesn't show that information, sir. But the 10:30 boat is fully booked, with no exceptions possible due to Coast Guard regulations. Howard's face reddened. This is unacceptable. I'm a platinum-level cruiser. I want to speak to your manager immediately. While Howard attempted to bully the tour operator, Martha turned her attention to us. How convenient that you two managed to get on the early tour while our family's reservations were mysteriously changed. Just lucky, I guess, I replied with a shrug. The falls are even more beautiful than I imagined. The light at that early hour is perfect for photos. I showed her a few pictures on my phone, watching as envy and frustration crossed her face. Her perfectly planned family photo opportunity ruined. You're behind all this, aren't you? She accused in a harsh whisper. The cabana, the dinner reservations, now this. You're sabotaging our family vacation. That's a serious accusation, Martha, I replied calmly. Almost as serious as abandoning a 14-year-old in dangerous heat for 3 hours and then dismissing her medical emergency as dramatics. Martha's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. So, this is some sort of revenge. I prefer to think of it as a learning experience, I said. Sometimes we don't understand how our actions affect others until we experience similar treatment ourselves. Before Martha could respond, Jack approached, concern etched on his face. What's going on? Dad's about to have a meltdown with the tour operator. Your mother and I were just discussing consequences, I explained. Actions and reactions. Cause and effect. Jack looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. Alexis, can we talk privately for a minute? I nodded, following him to a quiet spot away from the group. It's you, isn't it? He asked once we were alone. All these incidents. The cancellations. The booking problems. What do you think I countered? He sighed heavily. I think you're trying to teach my parents a lesson, but this isn't the way, Alexis. They're just getting angrier. Sometimes people need to feel the impact of their behavior before they can understand it, I said. Your parents have been deliberately cruel to Taylor for years, and you've allowed it. I'm simply showing them how it feels. By ruining the vacation. Their vacation was already ruined for Taylor when they abandoned her in dangerous heat and then dismissed her suffering. When they planned an excursion centered around the one food that could kill her specifically to exclude her. When they arranged to publicly announce trust funds for Ashley and Brent while leaving her out. Jack's expression shifted from frustration to shock. You heard about that. I did. And so did other passengers on this ship. Word travels fast in closed environments like this. Jack ran his hand through his hair. Look, I had no idea about the trusts until recently. I was planning to talk to my father about it privately. When after the public announcement designed to humiliate our daughter, after years of allowing them to treat her as less than... It's complicated, Alexis. My parents control a lot of our financial security. Our house, Taylor's school. I know all about your parents' financial control, I interrupted. And I also know you received a job offer yesterday that would free you from that control, if you're brave enough to take it. Jack's eyes widened. How did you? I have resources too, Jack. I've been watching your parents manipulate you with money for 15 years. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before he could answer, Howard's angry voice carried across the dock. This is absolutely unacceptable. Do you know who I am? The tour operator remained professionally calm. I understand your frustration, sir, but Coast Guard regulations limit the number of passengers per boat. Your family will need to take the 2 o'clock tour. This is ridiculous, Howard fumed. I'll have your job for this. I know people. It was in that moment that the sixth shocking twist occurred. As Howard continued his entitled tirade, I noticed several of his business associates watching from nearby. They had clearly witnessed his behavior, his attempt to use status and connections to bully a working person simply doing their job. More significantly, they had heard his dismissive comment when Martha mentioned Taylor's name. That girl isn't a real family member anyway. The look of discomfort and disapproval on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Howard's carefully cultivated image as a family man and respected businessman was crumbling in real time. Jack saw it too. "Dad's making a scene," he said quietly. "This isn't like him. He's usually so careful about his public image." "Privilege, unchallenged, becomes entitlement exposed," I replied. "Your father isn't accustomed to not getting his way. None of them are." We rejoined the group, just as Howard was threatening to contact the cruise line's corporate office. "Is everything okay?" I asked with feigned concern. "No, it is not okay," Martha snapped. "Our tour has been pushed to the hottest part of the day. Howard's business associates have already gone on without us. This entire excursion is ruined." I turned to Taylor. "Honey, why don't you show your grandparents and cousins some of the beautiful photos you took? Maybe it will give them something to look forward to." Taylor, understanding my intent, pulled out her camera and began showing Ashley and Brent her pictures from behind the waterfall. Despite their usual dismissiveness, even they couldn't hide their interest in the spectacular images. "That looks amazing," Ashley admitted. "How did you get back there?" "Our guide showed us a special path," Taylor explained. "He said the early morning tours get access to areas that are too crowded later in the day." I watched Martha and Howard's faces as they realized what they'd missed, not just the premiere time slot, but also exclusive experiences their status couldn't buy them. As we prepared to return to the ship, leaving the family to wait for their delayed tour, I delivered my final revelation of the day. "By the way," I said casually to Martha, "I've been in contact with Cameron, the customer relations manager. He's been very helpful in documenting everything that happened with Taylor at the last port. The medical report, the communication logs showing all my ignored messages, everything." Martha's face paled slightly. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Facts that several of Howard's business associates are now aware of, along with many of your society friends back home, thanks to my social media posts. You wouldn't dare make this public." Howard growled, finally joining the conversation. "I already have," I replied calmly. "The truth has a way of finding its way into the light, doesn't it?" The family returned to the ship in disarray, their perfect vacation irreparably damaged. By dinner time, the impact of my revelations was evident. Martha and Howard were noticeably absent from the dining room, choosing to eat in their cabin instead. Scott and Tiffany sat awkwardly with their children, clearly unsure where their loyalties should lie. Jack joined Taylor and me at our table, his expression serious. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "We do. Because tomorrow is the captain's dinner, and your parents are planning something that will hurt our daughter publicly. I won't allow that to happen." "Neither will I," Jack said. And for the first time in years, I believed him. The stage was set for the final confrontation, and I was prepared for whatever came next. The Sullivans had met their match, and by this time tomorrow, the family dynamic would be forever changed. The night of the captain's dinner arrived, the pinnacle of any cruise experience. The ship was transformed with elegant decorations adorning every surface and staff in their formal uniforms. Passengers dressed in their finest attire, creating an atmosphere of celebration and sophistication. Taylor looked beautiful in a new dress we'd bought from the ship's boutique, a deep blue that matched her eyes. I had arranged for her to have her hair styled at the salon, and the result was stunning, her usual ponytail transformed into an elegant updo that made her look older and more confident. "You look amazing," I told her as we prepared in our cabin. "How do you feel?" "Nervous," she admitted. "But good nervous, you know. Like something important is about to happen." It is, I confirmed. Tonight things change for our family, one way or another. Jack joined us, handsome in his formal suit. He'd been quiet all day, spending time in the ship's business center, making calls and sending emails. When he returned to our cabin, there had been a new resolve in his eyes. I accepted the job offer he told me privately while Taylor was in the bathroom. Executive VP position, 30% salary increase, and complete autonomy from my father's company. "Jack," I breathed, hardly believing what I was hearing. That's amazing." "It's what I should have done years ago," he said, regret clear in his voice. "I've spent too long letting my parents control our lives, letting them hurt you and Taylor. That ends tonight." We arrived at the captain's table precisely on time. Howard and Martha were already seated, along with Scott, Tiffany, and their children. Several of Howard's business associates and their wives completed the table. Martha looked surprised to see us, having clearly assumed we would skip the formal dinner after the tensions of recent days. Alexis, Jack, Taylor, Howard greeted us stiffly. "So glad you could join us." "We wouldn't miss it," I replied pleasantly. It's the highlight of the cruise, after all. As we took our seats, I caught Cameron's eye across the room. He gave me a subtle nod, confirming that everything was in place for what would come next. Dinner progressed with superficial pleasantries. Howard held court with his business associates, Martha commented on everyone's attire, and the rest of us maintained polite conversation while the excellent food was served. It was the calm before the storm, and everyone at the table seemed to sense it. As dessert was served, Howard cleared his throat and stood champagne glass in hand. This was the moment he had been planning, the public announcement of trust funds for Ashley and Brent that would once again exclude Taylor. If I could have everyone's attention, he began, his authoritative voice carrying across the table. As you know, this cruise is a celebration of my retirement after 40 years in business. But tonight I'd like to make it about the future rather than the past. Martha beamed up at him, anticipating the announcement they had carefully orchestrated. The Sullivan family has always valued education and opportunity, Howard continued. And tonight I'm pleased to announce that we are establishing educational trusts for— Excuse me, Captain Pearson? Cameron's voice smoothly interrupted as he approached our table with the ship's formal photographer. I believe this is the moment you wanted to recognize the Sullivan family. Howard looked momentarily confused, his prepared speech disrupted. The captain, a distinguished man in his formal whites, rose from his seat at the adjacent table. Indeed, Captain Pearson said with a warm smile. Ladies and gentlemen, each cruise we select one family for special recognition, a family whose journey with us has been particularly meaningful. Tonight we'd like to honor the Sullivan family with a special presentation. This was the 7th twist in our family drama, one that Howard and Martha had not anticipated. Their carefully planned announcement was being superseded by something entirely outside their control. The lights in the dining room dimmed slightly, and a screen descended from the ceiling. The ship's photographer stepped forward with a tablet that connected wirelessly to the screen. We've prepared a special retrospective of your family's time with us, Cameron explained. If everyone could direct their attention to the screen. What followed was the presentation I had arranged with Cameron and Andrea from the photography department. It began innocuously enough with beautiful shots of the ship and ports of call. Then came photos of the Sullivan family throughout the cruise. But these weren't the typical posed cruise photos. These were candid shots that told a very specific story, Martha physically moving Taylor out of center position in family photos. Howard turning away when Taylor was speaking. Ashley and Brent receiving lavish attention, while Taylor sat ignored at dinner. Then came the most damning images, the family piling into their private excursion van, Taylor visibly absent. Taylor and me sitting in the meager shade at the dock, clearly distressed from the heat. Taylor, in the medical center, receiving treatment for heat exhaustion, the timestamp clearly visible. The final slides were text-only, displaying excerpts from Dr. Rivera's medical report, documenting Taylor's heat exhaustion and the circumstances that caused it. The dining room had fallen completely silent. Howard's business associates and their wives were staring at the screen in shock. Nearby tables had also turned to watch, drawn by the unusual presentation. As the screen went dark, Captain Pearson's expression had transformed from ceremonial warmth to professional concern. Mr. Sullivan, he said gravely, it appears there are some serious safety issues regarding a minor that occurred on my ship. I'd like to speak with you privately after dinner. Howard's face had drained of all color. Martha looked as though she might faint. Scott and Tiffany were staring at their plates, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Ashley and Brent for once seemed genuinely uncomfortable with their privileged position. The silence that followed was broken by Taylor, who rose from her seat with quiet dignity. I'd like to say something if that's okay, she said, her voice steady, despite her obvious nervousness. All eyes turned to her, and in that moment I had never been prouder of my daughter. Family isn't about trust funds or fancy vacations, she began. It's not about who gets the most expensive gifts or who sits in the center of photos. It's about who shows up when it matters, who makes you feel safe and valued. She looked directly at Howard and Martha as she continued. I've spent years trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough to be a real Sullivan. I now realize that was never going to happen, and that's okay, because I don't need your approval to know my worth. Martha made a small, distressed sound, but Taylor wasn't finished. I forgive you for leaving me at the dock. I forgive you for all the times you've made me feel less than Ashley and Brent. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll allow it to keep happening. From now on, I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show any family member. Not because I'm a Sullivan, but because I'm a person who deserves basic kindness." The raw honesty of her words hung in the air. Then Jack stood beside his daughter, placing his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support. "Taylor's right," he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "And I owe her an apology, too. I've allowed this situation to continue for too long, prioritizing financial security over my daughter's well-being. That ends today." He turned to his parents. "Mom, Dad, I love you. You're my parents and nothing changes that. But I can't allow you to hurt my family anymore. I've accepted a position with Hamilton Enterprises. We won't be needing your financial support going forward." Howard's shock was palpable. "Jack, don't be hasty. We can discuss this privately." "No more private discussions where nothing changes," Jack interrupted firmly. "No more sweeping things under the rug. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to accept and respect all of us, including Taylor." It was Martha who surprised everyone by speaking next. Her perfectly maintained facade had crumbled, revealing something unexpected beneath vulnerability. "I never meant," she began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider her words. "That's not true. I did mean it. I've been terrible to you, Taylor. To both of you, Alexis." She dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "Howard and I came from nothing. Everything we have we built. I became so focused on preserving that legacy that I forgot what really matters. Seeing those photos, hearing what you went through because of me. I'm ashamed." Howard looked at his wife in disbelief. In 40 years of marriage, Martha Sullivan had likely never publicly admitted fault. "The trust funds," Martha continued, "were my idea. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That we could control who was really family. How foolish and cruel that seems now." She reached across the table toward Taylor, not quite touching her, but making the gesture. "I don't expect you to believe me right now, but I am truly sorry. If you'll give me the chance, I'd like to try to be the grandmother you deserve." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Taylor glanced at me, uncertainty in her eyes. I gave her a small nod, trusting her to make her own decision. "I'd like that," Taylor said carefully. "But it has to be real, not just words." It will be, Martha promised, tears now flowing freely down her carefully made-up face. "I give you my word." Howard, seeing his wife's transformation, seemed to age 10 years in an instant. The powerful businessman was suddenly just an old man confronting his own failings. "The trust funds will be established for all 3 grandchildren," he said quietly. "Equal amounts, equal terms. I should have done that from the beginning." Scott and Tiffany, witnessing this family reckoning, finally found their voices. "We've been complicit in this too," Scott admitted. "Going along with Mom and Dad's favoritism, never speaking up. Taylor, we're sorry. We should have been better aunt and uncle to you." The public nature of this family reconciliation might have been uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. Too many hurts had been hidden, too many slights dismissed in private. The witnesses around us ensured accountability, a safeguard against empty promises. As dinner concluded, our family moved to a private lounge area to continue our conversation away from curious eyes. There were more tears, more apologies, and the first tentative steps toward healing. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it had begun. 3 months after the cruise, we hosted a family gathering at our home. Jack was thriving in his new position. Taylor had started high school with a new confidence. And remarkably, Howard and Martha were making genuine efforts to change. They called Taylor, regularly showed interest in her activities, and treated her with the same affection they showed their other grandchildren. The family dynamic had been fundamentally transformed. Not perfect, but honest. Not without disagreements, but with respect at its foundation. The painful lessons of that cruise had ultimately brought us closer, stronger, and more authentic as a family. As for me, I had learned something powerful about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to hold others accountable, to refuse to accept mistreatment of yourself or those you love. It isn't about revenge, but about creating boundaries that allow genuine relationships to flourish. Have you ever had to stand up to family members to protect someone you love? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true family is defined by love and respect, not by blood or names.